Good morning, everybody. It's time for the inquiry to resume. So welcome to week 3 of the Cambourne to Cambridge guided busway inquiry. The programme for today involves hearing evidence firstly from the Mayor of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. Then we have Friends of the Cam, and third appearances by PX Farms Limited. Those are the parties who are due to appear at the inquiry today. Before we move on to evidence, just one thing I think that I wish to raise, and that concerns the applications which are within the scope of the inquiry for the Section 19 certificates concerning the exchange of open space land within a part of the overall corridor. I just mentioned this following references that were made to it on Thursday during the session last week. I just want to remind parties here and watching on the live stream that this is one of the main considerations for the inquiry, which was identified as such in the pre-inquiry meeting note. It's clearly within the scope of the inquiry. So if parties have made representations concerning the exchange of open space land, it is reasonable to expect them to address it and indeed be asked questions on it. Of course, they may wish to rely on their written representations, and they will be taken into account. Having said that, which we just wanted to clarify the position concerning Section 19 situation, I just want to check whether there are any procedural matters before we move to evidence. Mr. Cameron, is there anything from the applicant? Sorry.
No, thank you, sir.
Does anybody else have any queries or points they wish to raise at this stage? If not, then we'll move to our first appearance of the day, which is the Mayor of the Combined Authority. Can I check who is appearing, please?
The Mayor?
Yes, I know, but
I'm the Mayor's Chief of Staff, and I'm here to ask clarification questions and then to do a re-examination. We understood that was acceptable, sir.
Yes. And could you give me your name, please?
Yes, of course. It's Peter Graham.
I think you said you're the Mayor's Chief of Staff. So, Mr. Graham, you're going to act as advocate, I take it, and take the Mayor through his evidence. Ask questions in chief.
That's right.
Right. And the usual procedure is, once that's been done and the Mayor has given his evidence, there'd be the opportunity for questions from the applicant. There may be questions from other parties who support the proposal for the order, and indeed there may be questions from myself and my colleague, Mr. Underwood. As advocate, you will have the opportunity to re-examine following those questions put to the Mayor. So, with no more ado, Mr. Graham, would you like to introduce the Mayor?
Thank you, sir. So, Mr. Mayor, would you like to start perhaps by introducing yourself and explaining why you're here?
Thank you very much indeed. So I'm Paul Bristow. I'm the Mayor of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, and I lead the Combined Authority. The authority is the Transport Authority, which is tasked with setting the overall transport strategy for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. The Local Transport and Connectivity Plan, the LTCP, was set out in 2023 by my predecessor, which will be amended in line with my manifesto in due course, and a series of sub-strategies, the Greater Cambridgeshire Transport Strategy, which will set out the long-term plan for Greater Cambridge, exploring various growth scenarios. Now, the main reason that I'm here, yes, I'm the Mayor, and yes, I have overall responsibility for transport in the region, but the reason I'm here is that I campaigned on a promise to oppose the C2C busway and push, if I'm completely honest, with the abolition of the GCP. But I've walked the route. I've spoke to campaigners. I've stood in Coat and Orchard. I find their objections convincing. I've talked to them. You know, they feel a lot of the time throughout this process they've not necessarily had a voice. I think it's important to air that voice, to campaign, and to voice that voice. And it's somewhat irony, really, that I find myself here in the sense that, as mayor, I have an ambition to create the fastest growing economy of anywhere in the UK. I'm not the sort of person you would typically see be against infrastructure, albeit this infrastructure has a 0.5 BCR. You wouldn't normally see me opposing things which can contribute to growth. But I think this is the wrong scheme, and that's why I'm here today, and to give voice to those people who in the past have perhaps felt that their voice has not been heard.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We obviously have your statement of evidence, which is core document 2611. I'm intending to start with that by asking about your powers in relation to bus franchising, followed by your future powers as set out in bills before Parliament, and we can then turn to points that have been raised in rebuttal documents and by other witnesses. Is that acceptable to you, sir, if I take that approach? Thank you.
Yes, entirely.
So, Mr. Mayor, as you've already stated, the Combined Authority is the local transport authority, not the applicant, nor for that matter the GCP. At paragraph 4 of your statement of evidence, you refer to powers on bus franchising and the Bus Services Act 2017. That Act amended the Transport Act 2000 so that, and I quote, the function of deciding whether to make a proposed franchising scheme is a function of the Combined Authority, exercisable only by the Mayor. Is it your understanding, therefore, that a decision on a future bus franchising scheme is entirely a matter for you?
It is, yes. While the decision was made by my predecessor in 2024, I think we've got some timeframes of when those decisions were made, and it's just worth noting the applicant. So the 6th of February 2025, the Combined Authority voted to recommend that the Mayor progress the next steps to introduce bus franchising, and that was supported by the leaders of the City Council and District Councils and the authorities who control the GCP board. While they will maybe set the funding envelope, details on routes is entirely a matter for the Mayor.
Okay, and so just for clarity, it follows that the scheme is not a matter for the board of the Combined Authority?
No. They set the funding envelope, but not the details of the scheme.
Thank you. You also, in paragraph 4, refer to service permits. Under any franchising scheme that you choose to adopt as Mayor, there will be a list of franchised routes. Is it your understanding that if a proposed service is not on your list, for it to run on either a busway or a regular road, an operator would need to apply to the Combined Authority for a service permit?
Yes, indeed they would, which would have to satisfy a predetermined criteria.
Okay, and that criteria is the service permit regime, which is governed by the Transport Act 2000 and the Franchising Scheme Service Permit England Regulations 2018, which are normally referred to as the SP regulations, which is a little easier to manage. So together, those will allow the Combined Authority to set conditions that all applications must meet. That's your understanding?
Yes, that would be the criteria by which we would determine whether a service permit would be permitted.
Okay, and given the...
Mr. Graham, sorry to interrupt, but when you ask questions, can you try and make sure that they're neutral in tone?
I will do my best, sir.
Rather than suggesting the answer in the question.
I apologise, I will do my best, sir. So, given the safety issues experienced with the existing busway, what kind of evidential threshold would you anticipate in those service permit regime guidance for non-physical guidance systems?
Well, I mean, I think the technology would have to be proven. As I understand, as it is at the moment, the guidance technology that's proposed is unproven, bar I think some sort of trial in Scotland where the decision was then suggested that it wouldn't continue. So they would have to meet that safety criteria. Also, they would have to meet a criteria that they would not be competing unfairly with existing franchised routes, because I've got a duty to the taxpayer to ensure that bus franchising, the franchising network, doesn't lose considerable amounts of money.
Okay, so just on that latter point, are you referring to Section 123Q of the Act, which says that the applicant would have to prove that the routes and service frequencies being proposed would not have, and I quote, an adverse effect on your franchise routes?
Well, it is likely that, well, it's not just likely, it's almost certain that franchising will have come in before the construction and the completion of the busway. So there will be a duty to put on already and franchise already routes that connect, let's argue, Cambourne to Cambridge already. We would have to ensure, and of course at the start, at the end of the route as well, we'd have to ensure that any franchised routes or any permit application to have a franchise route wouldn't negatively impact on those already franchised routes.
Okay. And given all that and your responsibilities as the mayor, has the applicant or the GCP engaged with you on any of those points?
Not specifically on those points, no.
Okay. Just to conclude my questions about franchising, the minutes of the Transport Committee of the CPCA on the 15th of September have been entered into evidence as core document 2931.3. Well, it doesn't need to be brought up, but I'm just referencing where this is coming from. Those cover the independent review of bus franchising implementation pathways, which you recently launched. Could you briefly explain the nature and purpose of this review?
Well, as I say, the last mayor, on the 6th of February, the combined board voted to recommend the mayor progress to the next steps to introduce bus franchising. The very next day, there was a mayoral decision notice confirming the decision to progress bus franchising. Look, I was elected on a manifesto promise not to increase the mayor's precept, and that is a promise that I wish to keep. There is a concern made, decision was made and voted on, as I say, on the 6th and the 7th of February, the 6th by the board, the 7th by the mayor. We do not intend to go back on that. So absolutely we're going to go ahead with bus franchising. The discussion now is the model that we adopt.
Thank you. If I can turn to the devolution bit. So at paragraph 4 of your statement of evidence, you refer to the English devolution community empowerment and its proposed expansion. So you've obviously been a member of Parliament in the recent past. Drawing on your experience as an MP, how likely is it that the government, with a three-figure majority, will be able to pass it?
It's almost certainly going to pass. There's no doubt. It's a clear direction of travel by the government. Indeed, we've just seen a Labour Party conference this week where they've talked at length about what the ambitions bill and for the power of mayors. As a member of Parliament, in the last Parliament, in the last Parliament,
given that the bill has already passed its second for some time in the summer.
Yes, absolutely. And I think there's a degree, may I just say, of cross-party support that this is the way to go.
Thank you. The bill is, in the evidence, is called document 2931.4. Schedule 24 of the bill, which doesn't necessarily need to be brought up, I'm just referring to the document that's there. That sets out a framework for the Secretary of State to deliver local government reorganisation, which is now known as LGR, which will see 7 constituent councils on your board replaced by new unitary authorities. In your opinion, the guidance that's been published on it, how many new unitary authorities are there likely to be on the council?
If you consider the guidance, Paul, was the initial guidance, that would suggest that there would be most likely to be 2, considering the population of Cambridgeshire as a whole. And there was a series of options worked out by councils, and there were A, B and C. One envisaged a 3 and 3 scenario that included Huntington, East Cambs and Peterborough joining together. Another one envisaged, sorry, forgive me, yeah, that's right. Another one envisaged just the Greater Cambridgeshire, 2 councils with 4 at the top. And another one envisaged Huntingtonshire going in with the Greater Cambridgeshire unit, so it would be again a 3 and 3 solution. Now, subsequently, there have been other suggestions put forward by either MPs or probably Peterborough, and the other based around the south, probably Cambridge.
Okay, and again, given the guidance published by the government, when would you anticipate those new councils going live?
The 1st of April 2028.
28.
So, just for clarity, the applicant, in your opinion, will no longer exist in 2020?
In its current form, no.
Okay. And clause 7 of the bill, which it may be useful to draw up, sets out new voting arrangements for your board, including on transport matters. Just so we can set the context, what are the existing arrangements on your board for transport?
Well, as it stands, when there are votes on transport, you have to have a 2/3 majority vote. Are we good there?
I think it's now on.
Okay, everyone can hear you. Well, I hope everyone heard the questions you put earlier. I certainly did. Forgive me. So at the moment there are, for transport votes, it requires a 2/3 in favour vote to get something through, so a positive vote with 2/3 of the members of the board voting for it, and that must also include the 2 Highways Authority, which in this, as it stands at the moment, is the applicant and Peterborough City Council.
And also, your vote doesn't count towards that total, is that correct?
Sadly not.
Okay. And under the change to the 2009 Act that's affected by subclause 5, those voting arrangements will be replaced by a simple majority on your board of 2 apart from you, and you will have both a veto and a casting vote.
That's the changes as I understand it. Look, this is a broad series of changes that are affecting mayoral and combined authorities across the country. It's not just specific to Cambridgeshire and Peterborough.
Okay. And the proposed subsection 6 of that new section, in effect, grandfathers those voting arrangements until LGR. So on that basis, do you anticipate most votes continuing as they do now until the date that you gave, which was April 2028?
Well, look, I mean, I'm hopeful that there would be changes before that period of time, and there would be the majority voting that the Act envisages, but can exist in its current form anyway.
Okay, so at the very least, you're anticipating having a year of your current mayoral term with new councils, a far smaller board, a simple majority vote system for every decision, and you would have a veto and a casting vote.
Yes, that's as the legislation is drafted, that is what I envisage.
Thank you. Yes, you're correct. It's clause 6. Thank you.
Thank you. Just so that everybody can follow.
And the development of local transport policies. Section 109 on the revision and replacement of local transport plans, and Section 112 on following guidance about preparing and changing transport plans. So that relevant identical wording that's inserted into each section says, references in this section to the local transport, you individually as the mayor, rather than your board or the authority as a whole, will become responsible for the development of local transport policies and how those policies are revised or replaced under guidance.
Well, that's what the legislation reads, but not just that. We've got a series of legal officers, as you can imagine, working for the combined authority, and that's their advice to me as well.
Your view that a resolution to adopt a new local transport plan would in future only require a simple majority vote of the board at this point in time. Is that what you meant? Or were you instead, in your statement of evidence, suggesting that the applicant's assumptions and assumed scheme might fail to be compatible with your final franchising scheme?
What?
Still a very leading question.
Well, look, I mean, what I meant is you've got to deal with things as you see it. Okay, at the moment there is a hypothetical busway. I have a duty to implement a franchising system that would come in regardless of whether this application is approved or not. That is the duty that I have to the taxpayer and indeed to the travelling public. And I can't 100 passenger journeys at the moment to over 10,000 passenger journeys. That's significant. I can't guarantee that they would be compatible with any franchising plan. But more than that, I can't guarantee that approving any of those routes would be compatible with any franchising plan or franchising system that is established prior to any busway being constructed. We may not have a busway. I have 2016 bill. I mean, that's uncontested.
Compliance in this case would be with the Transport Act 2000 and the so-called SP regulations that we went through earlier, would it?
That is what my legal officers suggest, yes.
Okay, and they obviously don't support Mr. Baker's claim.
No.
Mr. Baker also makes his claim conditional on the combined authority not specifying its reasons, but presumably if a service permit application were rejected, any such reasons would be specified, whether they're related.
For me, that some of the criteria that would need to be met should a service permit be allowed. You know, first is safety. I mean, you know, that's the most important thing I think we're thinking about at the moment. The busways, we're about to construct £6 million, aren't we, on fencing along all the busways because of safety concerns with existing busways, and that's going to have a significant impact, as I understand it, on timetabling and stagecoach and all sorts of other things going on. That's a matter for me to deal with following this meeting. But look, there have been existing safety issues with the busways. A tragic crash took place with a fire engine only earlier this year. I met some of the survivors from that last week. Some of the bus drivers, in fact, who went above and beyond. But so first off, the technology has to be proven. Right? At the moment, it's unproven. Okay, so look, I would not allow a service to run on the busway under my franchising system that negatively impacts an already franchised service. I mean, that just makes sense. It's not a duty to the taxpayer.
And
excuse me, Mr. Mayor, can I just clarify something? You referred to £6 million being spent on fences. Is that remedial work on existing busways?
Yes, so that's on existing busways. So there's been the county council, or the applicant, they've got my sympathy. Everybody wants these busways to be safe as possible. I'm not blaming necessarily the applicant, but they've been fined £6 million because of safety concerns already. I think it was 6 million. Forgive me if I've got that number wrong. But they're spending an additional amount of it, which I think is 6 million, to erect fencing. There's been a number of issues with either drivers driving into the bus lane and finding themselves in ditches, but most recently the accident that took place earlier this year. I think it was in January earlier this year, life-altering injuries as a result.
Thank you.
thank you. And so, were a service permit application not to meet the safety threshold that you had set, or were it not to be compatible with your existing franchise route? Understanding is that the authority would be obliged to issue a written notice to the operator who'd applied, clearly explaining the reasons.
Mr. Graham, you're repeatedly suggesting. Mr. Graham, you're repeatedly suggesting the answers.
The answers. Confirming a start date of the 5th of September 2027 on the 17th of February. We have then, CPCA Transport Committee papers and discussion confirmed that the commissioning of the independent review, which has been led by Leon Daniels, absolutely is our intention to push ahead. It's not intention, we are going to push ahead with bus franchising, not least because if we wanted to move to a different model, it would require us to go through all the consultation exercises that we previously had, which not only would be wrong, it would be very unwise, not least because of the political will around my board to push ahead with franchising from the applicant, indeed from the applicant themselves, or the applicant's representative on the board.
And in that board meeting on the 6th of February 2025, which I think is in evidence as core document 2931-2, how did the three local authority representatives for the Greater Cambridgeshire area vote?
Well, the evidence is there, it's all published, they all voted in favour.
Including the applicant's representative?
Including the applicant. And they're all in favour of franchising. No one on my board supports unpicking the franchise, which again would go to considerable expense and considerable time, the franchising, the principle of franchising, which was established by my predecessor back in February.
So, do you agree with Mr. Baker's claim that the authority didn't commit to a time frame for franchising?
No, because I've just said that. On the 17th of February, the CPCA franchising scheme was published, confirming a start date of the 5th of September 2027. Now, look, will this date be slightly amended as a result of the independent review? That's certainly possible. It may make sense to start it at the same time as the financial year for all the reasons I outlined earlier in my in the evidence that I gave, or the answer to your question I gave. But please do not underestimate the determination, not just me, but my board, to push ahead with franchising.
And do you agree with his point that the scope of services franchising, operating under franchising, cannot be confirmed?
As I said earlier, the principle of franchising is what's been agreed. The funding envelope of franchising is what's been agreed. The independent review will determine the model of franchising, but we are moving ahead with franchising. So I would suggest that statement would not be correct.
Yeah, and the territorial scope of franchising would be the whole of Cambridgeshire and
Would be
Peterborough.
the whole of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough.
Right. Paragraph 5.1.3, Mr. Baker returns to the voting system established by the 2017 order and says, any decision to make a transport plan or spend money on transport-related matters can only be made with the support of the applicant. Presumably you agree that that is the case for the present?
Yes, absolutely. And look, the decision, in fact, has already been made. It was made, and the funding allocated to bus franchising, the budget allocated, that decision has already been made.
But given our previous discussion, it may not be the case when the devolution bill is passed that the support of the application...
That was the response to the question I gave to you earlier. The English devolution bill changes the nature of those discussions. But again, I just want to reiterate the point that you do better, I think, in politics when you have, a degree of consensus, collaboration, and you work together. It's not my intention to bulldoze anything necessarily through. I just, that does change the voting arrangements. I work very, very closely with the applicant's representative on my board, and I don't envisage that ever changing. But the English devolution bill and the changes that are in there are clear.
So, paragraph 5.1.4, Mr. Baker goes on to make the following claim. It is not possible to form a view on whether or not franchising will be adopted, and if it is adopted, whether or not buses will be franchised on the proposed route. So, what's your reaction to that?
Well, franchising will go ahead, and I will have franchising responsibility for the whole of Cambridgeshire. That includes some sort of service that links Cambourne to Cambridge. Now, I don't want to reiterate previous points, but I have to design a franchising system which is the reality as it is at the moment. That may or may not include a busway. What I can't guarantee is first and foremost the frequency that the applicant suggests or envisages within their application, and secondly, whether at all I can commit to franchising on a franchising service on the busway, considering the impact it may have on already established franchising routes, both along connecting Cambourne to Cambridge. But also, we have to remember, this is a route that originally this scheme envisaged, it came to a tunnel. At the moment, it ends without a tunnel, and then it has to snake its way through the centre of Cambridge. There can be all sorts of implications for existing franchised routes within Cambridge, and then before the route gets to Stirling Road in Cambourne as well. There are going to be consequences there too.
So, would you agree with one part of what Mr. Baker's claim at paragraph 5.1.4, which is that if bus franchising is adopted, it's not possible to form a view that whether buses will be operated on the proposed route?
There you go. Well, I knew there would be agreement somewhere. I absolutely agree with Mr. Baker on that point.
And that outside of that, the only other way it could run would be through a service permit application?
Yes, as it reiterated earlier.
Yes, okay. And that service permit regime is a matter for the Mayor alone to determine along with the franchising scheme. Yeah. A final point on Mr. Baker's claim at 5.1.4, when he talks about a proposed route, does he mean, or do you think he means, the busway alone?
Sorry, will you repeat the question?
Well, he talks about a proposed route. Do you take that proposed route to just mean the busway itself between Stirling Road and Grange Road?
No, because I don't want to continue to repeat myself, but the responsibility I have is for bus franchising, as a whole, and one has to consider how they're allowing a service permit or including a envisaged busway in the scope of my franchising agreement, which would be quite wrong to do, how that would impact on other services.
Yeah. So because is your understanding that the applicant wants to have multiple bus routes that would use the bus?
Oh, sorry, forgive me. Yes. So look, I mean, as I understand it, there are a number of services intended on the busway. So, for example, some will go to different parts of Cambridge. One is envisioned to go through to the biomedical campus. I guess one of the challenges is that this has been considered without the impact of something like East West Rail, which would reduce that service into the biomedical campus significantly, whereas a busway that snakes its way through congested central Cambridge is probably to the biomedical campus, or indeed turns back on itself. One has to consider when they're looking at franchising arrangements whether that would be a popular route for people living in Cambourne who want to get to the biomedical campus. If not, then that would have, and we're effectively running empty buses on that route. It would have a significant impact on the taxpayer.
So is one potential outcome, therefore, given what you said, that under a service permit application, buses could be permitted to run between Stirling Road and Grange Road, but not beyond either?
Well, because the only route that he's talking about there is the actual busway route. It's how it connects, as I said in my previous answer, it's how it connects into the rest of the network. They've got to consider impacts prior to Stirling Road and what happens when it gets to Grange Road, because it's going to have impacts for the rest of the franchising network.
And the frequency of services on that route likewise?
Yeah.
Right. At paragraph 5.1.6, Mr. Baker says that the scheme as currently proposed is aligned with CPCA policy. You talked a bit about this earlier, but how do you regard the transport policies that you inherited as mayor in terms of the local transport plan or more broadly?
Well, I've got there's plenty in the local transport plan that I strongly object to. One would recognise that was passed by my predecessor, where I disagreed with him on many things, but things such as road closures, congestion charging. They don't call it congestion charging now. They call it what do they call it? They call it demand management and fiscal measures. I think that sounds like congestion charging to me. So there are a number of things that contained within that plan that I disagree with, and look, through consensus, through collaboration, through working together with my board, I want to ensure that that plan reflects priorities contained within my manifesto. We've moved away from congestion charging. That was a previous scheme put forward by the GCP that was not welcomed at all in Cambridge, to the point that almost every political party and the GCP themselves, the people of Cambridge and Cambridgeshire have moved on from.
Okay, so the busway as proposed and its alignment with CPCA policy, that alignment may not last. Well,
whether it does or whether it doesn't is a different. It may well align with the document that I subsequently want to change, or it may not. But I guess what I would argue is that document is going to be reviewed. It will be reviewed during my term in office. And then that probably puts a question mark on that claim. But look, I don't want to come across as too dogmatic. You achieve these things through collaboration and working together.
I understand. Again, at paragraph 5.1.6, Mr. Baker says that in the future it, as in the busway, could at some point be upgraded to light rail operation.
Sure.
Have you seen any evidence from the applicant on the conversion costs of a busway to a light rail line?
Not yet. I take the commitments that we've had from people like Peter Freeman and others at face value. I think the argument for some sort of mass rapid transit system is widely accepted. But as of yet, converting the existing busway into light rail, just as much as I think that would be more congruent with my policy direction, it would be problematic, because ultimately what you would be expecting people to do is you build a busway, you run buses on it for a brief period of time, and then you shut it again for a year or whatever in order to convert it to light rail. I'm not sure that in the short term would be a very wise thing to do.
Or presumably cost effective.
Or cost effective.
Yeah. And Mr. Baker suggests, and I quote, that you have no current plans or commitments for light rail. How do you respond to that?
Well, I mean, I'm not sure that's entirely true. I mean, I did envisage that it would take some time to get a consensus around light rail or mass rapid transit to be to be something to consider. Now, I don't think anyone now doubts that some form of MRT is the right way to go. It should be commissioned, should be looked at, considering the growth scenarios contained by the Cambridge Growth Company, which I support. But also, in terms of light rail, what have I done? I've recently employed a commissioner on light rail, Peter Cushing. He advised the mayor of Manchester, Andy Burnham, on light rail. I think he was responsible for the light rail, the metro extension, in Manchester. He comes with a great deal of expertise in this area, and indeed I'm working with him to see how a MRT and or light rail may feature within the Greater Cambridgeshire transport strategy.
Okay. As you say, Mr. Cushing is...
Which we have responsibility for delivering.
Yeah, Mr. Cushing is a light rail expert. So have you had any discussions with him or others about the relative costs of building light rail versus building a busway from scratch on greenfield sites?
Well, yes. I mean, in terms of per kilometre cost, light rail comes out very positively in terms of, actually I think it's cheaper per journey. But I'm not a transport expert. You know, I'm not going to go into detail on it. But as I understand, there may be extra costs associated with sort of substations and lighting, etc. But in terms of a per kilometre rollout, it comes out as cheaper than the busway.
But is that because you envisage sort of crushed ballast and
forgive me.
Yeah, I mean, Mr. Graham, either you give the evidence or you don't feed the evidence to Mr. Bristow.
I apologise. I do not have your legal experience, so I've just tried to frame my questions as best as I can. But I note your point.
Look, I mean, obviously I have a series of conversations. I'm not a transport expert either. I have a series of conversations with Peter Cushing that considers a number of different pieces of advice which would suggest to me that light rail would be cheaper per kilometre, or could be cheaper per kilometre than a busway. I'm not going to get into detail of that because I'm not a transport expert, but that's why you appoint people to these positions. And I think appointing someone like Peter Cushing, who was responsible for the extension of the Manchester Metro, I defer to his judgment.
Thank you. Turning to a different topic, which is the Greater Cambridge Transport Strategy, which is referred to at paragraph 3 of your statement of evidence. What is the purpose of this strategy, and what will the work involve?
Well, that determines the purpose of the strategy. It's a sub-strategy of the local transport strategy. But what that determines is how future growth scenarios for Cambridge can be enabled through transport connections. First and foremost, it accompanies the local plan, right? I mean, that's the first thing it does, and that's the purpose of the document. And it's the responsibility of the combined authority to produce that document.
So is your intention that acts as a supporting document for the local plan?
Yes, that's what I've just said, yes.
But is it also your intention to look beyond that, or is it just limited?
Well, in terms of growth scenarios, so Peter Freeman is a reality, the Cambridge Growth Company is a reality. The strategy has to reflect that reality, or it's not a strategy. That's what it'll do. It would look about how potential growth scenarios might emerge, and what transport interventions might be possible to enable that, such as MRT.
Mr. Graham, perhaps instead of saying, is it your intention that, you could just say, what is your intention? That's a neutral question.
I understand, sir. In terms of modelling of those transport interventions, what is your intention?
To ensure that mass rapid transport. Well, first off, you would look at perhaps three scenarios in terms of growth. You would look at growth which is envisaged. You'd look at the local plan. Then you would look at what would happen beyond that in terms of the emergence of a growth company. Okay, I listened to Mr. Freeman's evidence. I think he took part earlier evidence session where he said that Cambridge Growth Company would envisage significant growth beyond that contained within the local plan up to the year 2050. It would be irresponsible for the Greater Cambridge Transport Strategy not to explore those scenarios and find out what transport initiatives may be necessary to enable that growth.
Will that involve updated information on transport movements, patterns of work, where development?
Well, we will commission that piece of work, yes, and of course it has to reflect what might happen in the future, and it's an evolving document.
And the model itself is one that's agreed between the applicant and the growth company and the GCP as being the appropriate way to measure transport demand?
Yes.
Okay, and what is the time frame for this Greater Cambridge Transport Strategy?
We will be publishing December 2026.
Okay, and as previously noted, as a sub-strategy, that may be a matter for you and not for the board.
It's a matter for the mayor.
Thank you. I'm drawing a close, you'll be pleased to know. I just wanted to look at the wider context. So in paragraph 23 of your statement of evidence, you talk about your conversations with stakeholders and elected representatives, and note their enthusiasm for light rail as a concept. Have you found similar enthusiasm for the busway?
Well, I'm drawn to what Peter Freeman himself said. He said, didn't he, in his evidence, that don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And I understand why someone would reach that the conclusion. The question mark is whether this busway is in fact good. Look, there are people who either feel it's been going on for so long, it's either never going to happen, it's just something that happens in the background, 11 years. There are people who feel, well, look, we spent this amount of time on it, we've got to do something, and this is something. Whether it's the right thing or not, it's entirely different. I don't find the same. No one's enthusiastic about it. If people feel it needs to be done, it's just something that seems to be necessary because we have to do something, and this is in fact something. There's also other things as well. People would say, oh, this is that, say at the Bourne airfield, etc., because that was part of the planning application.
Just by agreement between South Cambridgeshire and the developer?
It's a planning condition. Any planning condition can be altered as a result of a discussion.
Thank you. And so on what kind of signal it would send to investors and the relative importance of that vis-a-vis other things, for example, the Hartree decision recently?
I mean, that's a very good point, and I kind of understand that. The Hartree decision, I think, was much more point, because I think the growth plan, the fact that the Cambridgeshire point, because I think the growth plan, the fact that the Cambridgeshire Growth Company exists, the fact that the government only last week there was a Matthew Pennycook, the minister, produced a video reaffirming the government's commitment to Cambridge. That's what will give investors confidence in my mind. And if we can unpick and unblock that wastewater challenge, that is a much more considerable support for investor confidence than the C2C busway.
Thank you. I mean, obviously, you'll be aware of the political debate around development, which is sometimes characterised as the blockers versus the builders.
Yeah.
I mean, your critics would put it to you that you're on this scheme a blocker in disguise.
No, look, I'm not. I mean, as I said in my opening statement, I find it's a slight irony that I'm here as someone who's very much a pro-growth mayor, who very much everything. I mean, my slogan is get Cambridgeshire and Peterborough moving. That's how I won this election, on the basis, and everything we do in terms of the corporate plan, it contains, that kind of ethos about get Cambridgeshire and Peterborough moving. That is what I want to do. I don't think this scheme does that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr Cameron, I'm sure you've got some questions. We'll be looking for a break about 11:30.
Thank you, sir. Good morning. Is it Mr. Bristow or Mr. Mayor? Which do you
can call
prefer?
me whatever you want to.
Well, that gives me a wide range, doesn't it? Good morning, anyway.
Good morning.
I'd like to start, hopefully, in a spirit of collaboration.
Good.
One of your, you described yourself as a pro-growth mayor. Can I ask you this? Are the local plan housing and employment allocations at Bourne Airfield and Cambourne West part of the growth you'd like to see?
Yes, and I don't envisage that, as I said earlier in my response, I don't consider them to be, the CTC to be instrumental necessarily to achieving them.
Right. So if we go in your evidence, please, to paragraph 17, if you've got that to hand, your statement, proof, whatever you like to call it. And if we look at what you say there, second sentence, there is a need to improve transport links along the Cambourne to Cambridge corridor to allow development at Bourne Airfield and Cambourne to progress. So you're in favour of that development, you've just said. There is a need to improve transport links to allow it to progress. So can we take it you're in favour of some scheme which unlocks or unblocks that development?
I'm in favour of any scheme that would improve connectivity around Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, but that does not adversely impact, let's say, the environment like this scheme does, or adversely, or can put things such as bus franchising that I'm responsible for at risk.
Can we go back to the question? Are you in favour of a transport scheme which you say is needed in order to achieve the aim that you advance of promoting growth at Cambourne and Bourne Airfield?
I'm convinced that there are alternative schemes that would achieve that,
but-
yes.
But you're in favour of a scheme, not this scheme?
Well, I'm in favour of schemes. I'm in favour of the fact that East West Rail will connect, Cambourne to Cambridge. I'm in favour of. I'm convinced by the merits of a scheme put forward by Cambridge Past, Present, and Future, an on-road scheme. And I'm also convinced that through franchising, any enhanced bus service we can put on to connect Cambourne to Cambridge would be helpful.
Well, let's just investigate that for a moment. So you are in favour of a scheme, and the purpose of the scheme which you favour, and we'll go into the range of options, would be in part to unblock the blocking of growth at Bourne Airfield and Cambourne.
No.
Is that correct?
No, because what you're trying to block me into, if I may say so, is to a situation to say, the only way we can unlock those schemes is to uncritically embrace the C2C busway because other schemes have in some way been discredited. That's kind of where we're going here. I do not accept, for the first point, that the only way to develop those schemes is to commit to this scheme, C2C busway. What they say is a scheme, okay, or a transport scheme. And secondly, I think that can be amended at, as I say, between a discussion between the applicant and the developer. We do want to see improved connectivity and transport, that does not mean it has to be this scheme.
No, I'm not suggesting that at the moment. We'll just see. But we've got.
We're going to get there, though, aren't we?
Can we? Well, let's just see what we agree on and what the logic
Okay.
that flows from it.
All right.
We agree that you favour, as does the applicant, growth at Bourne Airfield and Cambourne in accordance with the adopted local plan. That is agreed, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be.
Can we just have a yes or a no?
I mean, I think that site. Yes, okay. I think that site would be a good potential site for development.
Well, it's got planning permission,
Yes,
hasn't it,
that's
Bourne Airfield? You're in favour of growth. It contributes to growth. Yes?
I think we're going to go down that route, exactly what you've said. You're going to try and put me into a situation where I would have to say the only means to achieve what I would want to see, and I'm just not going to do it, Mr. Cameron, that you would turn around and say to me, the only way we can achieve the growth that I'm in favour of is to build this scheme.
Mr. Mayor, you can qualify your answers by all means, but I would like an answer to the question that you're
Well,
asking.
yes, I'm in favour of that scheme.
Good. And that scheme is dependent upon improvement of transport links between Cambourne and Cambridge. You say it in your evidence. There is a need to improve those links.
I say there's a need to improve those links.
Yep. So it then comes down to how do you improve those links in order to unlock that development? Question for you, do you agree that the applicant scheme would achieve that objective?
At an unnecessary cost.
Well, so the answer is yes, but you say it's an answer.
The GVA is poor, and it has an impact on the environment, as we know at Coton Orchard, and it comes at expense, considerable expense to the taxpayer when there are cheaper alternatives.
And you say GVA poor. I think you mean the BCR, but I'm not going to take you up on that. Acronyms fly around and get lost, and we've had a problem already on that. When you say the BCR is poor, you referred to it in your evidence at 0.5. But are you aware that if you take land value uplift into account, it's actually up to 1.8. Did you know that?
I did know that, yes. But then, that still doesn't suggest to me that it's the best, it's as good as it should be. Without it, as I say, it's 0.5. You look at something at Ely Junction, which has just been turned around, and that's 4.8.
And in terms of alternatives, you in your evidence at 17 say one such alternative is that promoted by CPPF, which you say could be delivered more quickly. So that's you making a statement as the time in which it would take to deliver the CPPF scheme.
Well, I've met Cambridge past, present and future, and I find their arguments convincing, but you'll hear from them in due course.
We will, and I'll have a chance to ask them questions. But you say, when you say could be delivered more quickly, is that on the basis of some analysis you or your team have conducted, or what you've been told by CPPF?
I find their arguments very convincing.
Can you answer the question? Is that on the basis?
I'm not a transport expert. We have not commissioned our own independent review into it, but I find their answers extremely convincing, and you'll have the opportunity, Mr. Cameron, to ask them questions about that later.
Have you? Okay, thank you. Now, can we just have a look at this alternative proposal? You've suggested we'll consider CPPF. I'll have a chance to ask them questions, which is all quite right, and they're coming with experts. But do you put forward any evidence supported by expert transport analysis of an alternative deliverable scheme?
I'm not a transport expert, so no. What I'm responsible for is policy, bus franchising, all the things that we talked about earlier. But I find some of the arguments put forward by Cambridge past, present and future are convincing, and as I said earlier, you will have the opportunity to examine that at a later date.
Now let's, if we can, you raise the franchising point. Can we just first of all deal with your current decision-making powers? And I'm not going to go into a great legal investigation into it all. You know what your powers are, and also,
Well, that's a relief for everybody.
as you, yes. But the current arrangements are, and this is reflected in what you say, politics is the art of the possible. You have to deal with your constituent councils. And the current arrangement under the 2017 order, and we can turn all this up, is that to get a transport plan through or to spend money, financial decisions on budgetary matters, you need sign-off from the constituent authorities, and in particular Peterborough and Cambridgeshire. Is that a fair summary?
Well, that's what I said earlier, so
Yes.
I mean, I'm happy to repeat the point.
Yeah.
So when it comes to transport matters, it requires a 2/3 positive
Yeah.
majority to amend or change something, and that also includes...
I'm asking you at the moment, we'll come on to the bill, and again I'm not going into details of schedules and amendments and so. I'm asking you at the moment, we'll come on to the bill, and again I'm not going into details of schedules and amendments and so on, but we can if we need to. And if one just takes an example of this, you've introduced the 15th of September meeting and the September meeting and the notes of that, minutes of that meeting and the records of that, minutes of that meeting and the recommendation. Do you have I think we're calling it CD 29 agreement in order to do that, aren't you?
Well, if I wanted to do that next week, yes, I would.
Yeah. Until any changes come in as a result of new legislation.
Yes.
And even if we go to the new legislation, and you've been a Member of Parliament, so you will be more familiar with this than I am, but at the moment this bill has had its second reading. It's been committed to a public bill committee, so it's at the committee stage in the Commons. It was introduced in the Commons, wasn't it?
It was.
And so it has to go through the public bill committee. It then completes its procedures in the first house and goes to the second house.
Yes.
And during that process there can, and often are, be amendments. That's the point of this scrutiny and consideration at committee stage, isn't it?
Well, I would suggest that in reality, yes, in theory that is correct, but in reality it's very rare to see substantial changes in the Commons Bill Committee process, because that require a change of direction that a government is often unwilling to do. To get changes to things initially, the best time to do it would be at the white paper rather than when a bill is published. Now, the Lords, that's a little different. So when it comes to the second chamber, there is more scope for change, because it's not as place the word antagonistic, but in the Lords they're more willing to kind of examine things and deliberate than they are perhaps in the House of Commons. But substantial changes relating to, perhaps Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, I think would still be unlikely to emerge at Bill Committee in the House of Lords. If you can point to times where that has happened, I'd be keen to see it. But in my experience as a Member of Parliament, it's extremely unlikely to ever happen in the House of Commons. Could happen in the House of Lords, but I would be extremely surprised. at Cambridgeshire and Peterborough would have a different settlement to anywhere else in the country?
Not suggesting Cambridgeshire and Peterborough would have a different settlement. I'm putting to you, and I think you agree, that the point of the legislative process is to enable members of the legislature to have their say, to consider amendments, and if appropriate, make amendments. And that can happen in either or both houses,
That's
can't
a
it?
wonderful system we have.
Yep. And that's what people are elected to Parliament to do.
Well, of course, members of the House of Lords aren't elected.
No,
but that's where
or
they're
appointed
to do.
Yes, thank you. Quite right. And can we just, if we can, I do want to just ask you one point on the one of the provisions of the bill which you did refer to, and so this is CD 29/31/4, I think. You were taken to, and that's why I just checked that I was looking at the right provision. You were taken to clause 6 on voting, and do you have that to hand or not? No, but okay. Well, let's just see how we get on.
See how we get on.
Yeah. It's page
I think there should be a copy for the witness.
page 5. Thank you.
Okay.
And you were taken to clause 6, which is about combined authorities and county authorities decision making, and this is one of the points, and it's not hopefully not a complex point, it's a perfectly simple point. And if you go to page 5, you were taken to the new voting arrangements that are proposed, and there's a proposal to insert a section in an existing Act, 104CA, decision making, and then always been fascinated that you have clauses and then you have subsections despite their clauses in Parliament. But anyway, there we go. There's a subsection at, they're not, rather than a subclause 5, and then there's a 104CA is going to be inserted into the existing Act. But if we look at subsection 6, subsections 1 to 5 are subject to provision made in any other enactment whenever passed or made. So in order to give effect to this, the Combined Authority Order 2017, which sets up the existing arrangements, would also have to be changed, wouldn't it?
If you say so, Mr. Cambourne. I'm not legally trained.
No.
I've not. If you say so, that's the case.
Yeah.
Look, I've had legal advice from my officials, and my evidence is consistent with the legal advice I've received.
But can we just put it this way, that the changes to the law have a way to go. You've expressed a view on whether they're likely to be enacted, but can we agree this? It will take a little time to go through the parliamentary process.
Okay. All right, I hear what you're saying.
And the changes are made, and then there will have to be a tidying up operation to see whether any statutory instruments have to be changed.
I think I understand the point you're saying. So do I envisage it will take a little bit of time? We're in the second reading, committee stage in the Commons. It has to go through the House of Lords, as you rightly said, and then there will be some tidying up exercises following that. That is normal process. But look, I think we can be assured of the government's intended direction of travel. They're determined to do this for a number of different reasons, and I think we could safely suggest that this will pass at some point early next year. Oh, we've received royal assent, forgive me, before the summer of next year.
Before the summer of next year, and then any changes that were necessary to be made to statutory instruments would have to be considered and made.
If you say so, Mr. Cameron.
So, thank you for that. Can we now just turn to your position on bus franchising?
Yeah, sure.
Now, just as a matter of principle, if we can, and this is no doubt your approach, not controversial, but there is an existing constitution for the combined authority. We've got it in our core documents 957, and at the moment this determines the procedures to be followed by the combined authority, set out for all to see, doesn't it? That's the point of the constitution.
Okay.
Yeah. And this is just a matter of principle, but I'm looking at 6.1. It's on page 40 of core document 957, if everybody else would like to have a look at it. But it's a broad matter of principle I'm going to put to you, not some technical point about a paragraph. It's just... So that states all decisions of the authority should be made in accordance with the following principles, and it sets out 12 principles. But one of those principles, at 6, is due consideration to be given to all options to guard against any form of predetermination in any decision-making process. That's a principle that you would agree with, isn't it?
Quite right.
Yeah. And so that's why, in your evidence, you've been very careful to say, not that you wouldn't authorise a franchise route on the busway, or that you would, because you wouldn't want to predetermine any proposal put forward if and when the busway is constructed, would you?
Absolutely.
Because you'd have to consider at the time issues of safety, the function of the route, whether it would provide a service that people wanted, and so on.
Yeah, I think we're in violent agreement.
Good. Well, that's a nice place to be, isn't it?
It is.
And just looking at the practicalities of this rather than who has the power and who doesn't, because your decisions are actually made on the basis of what's best for the population that you serve, aren't they? That's hopefully the way you go about your role.
Indeed.
And so if you had a position where there was development which had either happened or was waiting to happen at Bourne Airfield and Cambourne, and people who wanted to get from Cambourne to Cambridge and back, and if for some reason the CPPF alternative was found not to be deliverable and the busway was there, you're not going to say, well, you can't go on the bus if it can be run safely, are you?
I mean, I think what you trying to get me to the point of saying, which I'm quite happy to do so because I agree. You know, if and there's lots of ifs here.
Yeah.
If the busway is constructed, if the development goes ahead at Bourne Airfield, if the assumptions within the applicant's submission are realised, and if a subsequent application will not have any impact on existing franchising services, one is not going to dig one's heels in and reject it if it's considered good. Of course not. But I guess the point I was trying to give in my evidence is that there are lots of ifs there, and one can't take the applicant's assumed level of service at face value.
No, it would depend on how many people wanted to use it, how desirable it was to try and get people off the roads and into public transport, and all those factors, and you'd have to consider them all at the time, wouldn't you?
That's what I've said.
Yeah. And
With also, sorry, if I may say,
Yeah.
with a due consideration to the taxpayer, to cost, because what you don't want to do is, just because the busway is there, as I said earlier, if it's going to have a detrimental impact on existing routes, or mean considerable expense at the taxpayer's cost, i.e. in terms of subsidy of routes, etc., one has to take all of these things into consideration when making a decision.
but the aim of franchising is not to increase costs necessarily to increase costs for the taxpayer. I know that in a rural area you will have subsidised services, But the aim is to try and get people to run services profitably on the franchise routes, isn't
Well,
it?
one would hope, but look, the key point of franchising, it transfers the financial responsibility from the operator to the combined authority, and the financial responsibility then becomes mine.
But if, and I know it is, as you say, an if, but if the choice is to say to people in Cambourne, no, you have to sit on a bus which gets clogged up at various junctions and goes slowly, is subject to existing traffic problems, or can go down the busway, you're not going to stand in the way of people in Cambourne getting to Cambridge more swiftly, are you?
What I would also suggest, Mr.
Well-
Cameron, there are lots of ifs there.
Yes, there are.
And what I'd also perhaps would like you to take into consideration, there's lots of ifs in relating to East West Rail, there's lots of ifs in relating to, and this is for a franchising model to consider, there's also ifs about whether the busway would be the optimum route to get to, for example, the Cambridge Biomedical Campus. There are lots of ifs there, and one has to take a holistic view. But as you quite rightly say, and your point is my point, that one has to make a decision on franchising based upon all sorts of different considerations.
And you're not going to allow some, well, no, I won't put that to you. Thank you.
Mr Cameron, is this a good time for...
It is a good time to break, and I don't think we got that much more, and I'm sure that the Mayor knows that in these proceedings the general rule is that once you start giving evidence you don't talk to other people about it, and even in a break.
Yes. We'll adjourn now and resume the inquiry at 11:45.
Okay.
time to resume. Just before we do, I understand that there's been a technical problem with the live stream and there have been interruptions for people who want to follow the inquiry remotely during the first session today. However, I've been told that it will record properly and that people will be able, if they want to see what's happened so far today, they will be able to catch up later on. So with that, Mr. Cameron, back to you.
Thank you. Not very much, not many further questions, Mr. Bristow. Just, we reached what you described as violent agreement on a number of things. So we agree on supporting growth in Cambridge generally and specifically at Bourne Airfield and Cambourne, correct?
Yes.
Good. And no dispute between us that there is the need for a transport scheme, whether this scheme or something equivalent, in order to realise that aim of facilitating growth.
Well, there's a need to model a network across that area, which could involve buses, light rail, east-west rail, active travel, and the Greater Cambridge transport strategy will reflect that. So we agree on that.
Yes, good. And at the moment, because you're formulating plans, we'll take one step further. And are we also agreed that although you criticise this scheme on grounds of cost and other factors, this scheme would deliver a connection between Cambourne and Cambridge?
Where I think we're violently agreeing, if I'd like to suggest, is that I'm coming here to suggest that there are a number of factors that need to be considered before, in terms of bus franchising and developing that strategy. The busway is just one of them, whether it gets built or not.
Yes, but the busway would, you say not in the way that you favour, but it would deliver a public transport scheme between Cambourne and Cambridge.
If it's there, if it's constructed, then I would have to consider how a transport strategy would reflect that. And I think we're in agreement with that, because that would be then my decision. Right. What I'm here to do is to suggest that the applicant's assumptions are not guaranteed.
Right. And if we then go back to an earlier comment that you made when you were referring to Mr. Freeman's evidence, and I'm going to quote from one of the documents before the inquiry, which is our core document 705. It's a point of principle. I'm just going to tell everybody where the reference is so anybody can look it up. This was an independent economic review as far back as September 2018, and it's core document 705, and it's page 80. And what they say is they're making a recommendation for a package of transport and other infrastructure projects to alleviate the growing pain to Greater Cambridge. Should be considered the single most important infrastructure priority facing the combined authority in the short to medium term. And then there's a reference to digital technology, but it's this bit I want to ask you about, if everybody's got it. We also believe that this is a case where the best may be the enemy of the good, with longer term ambitions having the potential to obstruct the delivery of immediately needed short-term interventions. Now, you refer to the fact that this scheme has been under consideration since 2014, 11 years already. Do you agree that if the growth company's ambitions are to be realised, action needs to be taken now?
Well, this busway, as I understand it, this busway. No, I would not accept that. No,
You don't?
I wouldn't accept that.
Yeah.
I think there are things that couldn't be delivered quickly, such schemes that can be delivered quickly. And what I would say, this has taken 11 years to get to where we are, and the world is very different now than it was 11 years ago. And some of the evidence I've heard suggested that should we consider something like an on-road method, that it would similarly take 10 years. I'm not an expert in these things, but I can't possibly imagine why it would take 10 years to do something like that.
So, although you say, and no dispute between us, that you're pro-growth, your position is that you are prepared to, in fact, you advocate waiting for something better to turn up.
No.
Well,
No. What I'm suggesting is that any decision based upon whether we proceed ahead with this, any transport decision needs to counter a number of things. First is my understanding that a lot of the evidence around this was assumed around pre-2019, pre-COVID models, that East-West Rail was not considered into this. I think we can all be fairly certain that East-West Rail is a big deal, okay, and would have a big impact in all this, and that wasn't taken into consideration. We've got a Greater Cambridge transport strategy which is evolving, which takes into effect the scenario which the Cambridge Growth Company envisage, and I think that would be, and it's also light rail proposals as well, and I think that's the time to determine what the right scheme. Now, the other thing to consider as well, there are alternatives on which I find convincing, which I've said before, to on-road schemes. You know, it's a dual carriageway. We can have a bus lane there, but you must, Mr. Cameron, question those who advocate for that scheme at a later date.
but we're just taking an example so we can just test this position. Take Bourne Airfield. You've referred to the planning condition.
Yeah.
There's a condition which limits the number of homes that can be provided there to 500 unless this scheme or equivalent scheme
Yeah.
is delivered. And your position is that although this scheme would unlock Bourne Airfield, you are prepared to wait for something which has not yet been devised or formulated to come along at some future date. That's your position, isn't it?
I certainly think there are other schemes that could come at, as quickly as is envisaged here. And that's the evidence that I've been told. I find it convincing. If that is not the case, then you will unpick that when those who advocate for that scheme come at a later date. I do not accept the view that we must do something and this is something. That's what it seems to me.
But the alternative, the only alternative to which you point to, which is on the table, if I can put it there, is the CPPF alternative.
There have been a range of other alternatives.
What are the other alternatives?
Well, look, you must question those advocating for those alternatives when they come before you. I'm not a transport expert. My job is to suggest broad policy. And again, I think we're getting into ifs and buts. No. What I was coming here to do was to suggest that, give evidence suggesting that the applicant's assumptions are not guaranteed.
Straight question, what are the other alternatives apart from the CPPF scheme for a route from Cambourne to Cambridge? What are they?
Well, I think a light rail scheme should be examined. There are active travel schemes. There's already a dual carriageway there. And look, a busway that does not plough through agricultural land, if you like, Coat and Orchard. I think all of these things should be considered.
And
you must question those who advocate for those schemes when they come to present to you later on.
And what happens if the CPPF scheme is considered not to be deliverable? As the mayor seeking to promote growth, would you say no scheme is a better outcome than this deliverable scheme? Is that what you're telling the people who live in Cambourne?
I think this is a poor scheme, and if this scheme is not pushed forward. If it's there, then one must consider it. Okay? But if it's there, then we move on. But if this scheme, I think as it stands, this scheme is a poor scheme, and I think it's in the best interests of everyone that alternatives are pursued.
Yep. But so can we just get back to the question? If the choice is this scheme or no alternative deliverable scheme, which is it? Wait and hope for something better to
this is a
turn up?
hypothetical situation,
Well,
Mr. Cameron, may I say so? And it would be, it's your job to unpick those who advocate for alternative schemes later on, and depending on where you get to, we'll see where the cards lay.
But I'd like to know your opinion, please. If, and it's a hypothetical, the CPPF scheme is considered to be not deliverable, and there is no alternative deliverable scheme.
I don't accept that premise.
Well, just bear with me for a moment and see whether you can. If you don't want to answer the question, you can by all means.
It's not about not answering
Well,
the
can I
question.
just ask it?
It's not about not answering the question. It's about saying, okay, well, if this scheme, I would argue, as it stands, that this scheme has unacceptable consequences for the environment in terms of Coat and Orchard. It's depending on technology, which is unproven, and the information or the assumptions provided by the applicant cannot be guaranteed. So on that basis, I would advocate for it to not go ahead.
Right. So your message to the people of Cambourne is you would prefer no scheme for them to get to Cambridge rather than this scheme?
I would prefer an alternative scheme that does not have a detrimental impact on the environment to this scale of Coat and Orchard, that does not presume things that cannot be that can be guaranteed around bus franchising in the applicant's, does not cost 200 million when I'm convinced that alternatives could be done for a cheaper route, especially as we've got a dual carriageway nearby. So I don't accept the premise that it's this scheme or nothing.
But you do not, as the leader of the Transport Authority, with all the resources at your disposal, you do not put forward an alternative, do you?
Because there's been a change of policy. I've been in power for 5 months. I campaigned on a promise to oppose the CTC busway. That's why I'm here, as well as all the responsibilities that I would have should this busway be constructed. We are developing the Greater Cambridge Transport Strategy, where buses, active travel, East-West Rail, light rail, a whole range of transport interventions are being considered to find out which are the right ones which should envisage the growth that the Cambridge Growth Company have and the local plan.
And to go back to the question, you do not put forward an alternative to this inquiry.
There will be a whole range of alternatives when the Greater Cambridge Transport Strategy. We'll find out what's needed, Mr. Cameron. This is a scheme which was devised in 2014. We live in a very different world than 2014. We live in a world where East-West Rail is a reality. That's not being considered as part of this scheme. We live in a world where Cambridge South has been constructed, which is going to take so many people off the road and goes to Cambridge South. And we live in a world where the growth company envisage growth way beyond the local plan, which is envisaged to be delivered by 2041. That is the world we live in.
Yep. But in that world, you put forward no deliverable alternative, do you?
The deliverable alternatives will be assessed as part of the great. You can't suggest.
Well,
you would. I think it would be unfair and unreasonable, which I'm sure you would agree, for me to come here, having had 5 months in office, with a fully funded alternative. I find convincing the arguments put forward by Cambridge past, present, and future, and others. I'm sure you will have the opportunity to ask those questions on those later on. But I think it was absolutely right that we are devising a Greater Cambridge Transport Strategy which supports the local plan and envisages growth beyond that. And that's the guidance that I will formulate my plan on. I think that would be, that's entirely right to do so.
So, answer is no deliverable alternative at the moment, but you're considering future schemes.
Okay.
Is that fair?
Okay, well, that's how do you put it. Thank
Or do you agree with that?
I would, along with all the caveats I've just put forward,
You do, with the
with
caveat.
all the explanation that I've just put forward at the same time.
Thank you very much. I haven't got any other questions
Thank you
for
very
you.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Cameron. Ms Grabkin-Wright, have you any questions on behalf of the two districts?
No, thank you.
I don't think there's anybody else supporting the scheme to ask questions. I think we have some for you, Mr Mayor.
Sir.
First of all, going right back to the beginning of your evidence this morning, I just wanted to make sure that we fully understand the situation in Cambridgeshire and the Combined Authority. Could you just outline for us the relationship between the organisation that you lead and the various other bodies of local government
Sure.
in the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough area?
Also, I completely understand the need for clarity. It is a complex and confusing institutional arrangement.
There are various layers and not
No,
all
that
covering
it's-
the same geographical extent.
That's right. You know, it's a confusing institutional arrangement. I'll do my best to describe it as clearly as I can. So, the Combined Authority, of which I lead, we are the transport authority for the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough area. So that is the county of Cambridgeshire and includes the city of Peterborough, the city council area of Peterborough. So within that, there are two highways authorities. That's Peterborough City Council and Cambridgeshire County Council. And then there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 district councils, if you like, one of which is Cambridge City Council.
And they all sit below the county.
And they all, yeah, and the leaders of each of those, or their nominated representatives, sit on my board of the Combined Authority.
One from each authority.
One from each authority. So it's usually the leader, doesn't necessarily have to be, but it's usually the leader of each authority, and they sit on the board. So there'll be eight of us, 9 including a business
So
rep.
the districts, the county, Peterborough.
And Cambridgeshire, yeah, so it's the districts, Cambridgeshire County and Peterborough. And then there's also a business board representative as well. So that's so there's that. Okay, so confusing matters further is the GCP, which was established through the city deal back in whenever it was, 14. So that has been happening alongside this process. I mean, it would be worth kind of pointing out, should the, I mean, this is just my view, but I think it would be a commonly held one, and the GCP, the city deal, the GCP wouldn't have existed if the mayor or the combined authority and the mayor position had been established prior to that decision being made, and those powers would rest with, and subsequent finance rest with the mayor. But that's a view, because you can't go back and check all those things. But I think it's a pretty well accepted one. And then there's also the Greater Cambridgeshire Partnership, which is the two councils of Cambridge and South Cambs who often operate together for various public services and planning.
So the Greater
Cambridge Partnership. So, the Greater, not the Greater Cambridge Partnership.
No, the questions must come from the mayor.
Sorry, Greater,
Yeah,
sorry. Forgive me.
Especially if they're not right.
The Greater Cambridge Authority area, right? So that's, forgive me. And that's South Cambs and Cambridge, who
Yes.
often share services, and that includes planning. Forgive me for getting the... It's a confusing institutional picture. Even the mayor gets it wrong occasionally.
Next, I want to turn to franchising. And I wonder if you could just outline the main differences between how you see public transport being run if franchising were introduced and the current system.
Sure.
What does franchising bring that isn't there now?
Sure. So as it stands, any operator can apply to run a service across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. Some of those will,
Sorry to interrupt. When you say apply, who do they apply to?
bus operator. So,
To
so it
who?
would be the highways authorities.
So that would be the highways authorities either in Peterborough or Cambridge County Council.
That's right.
Thank you.
And then, but overall responsibility of the delivery of those services, if you like, is the responsibility of the Transport Authority, which is the combined authority. Now, what tends to happen is budget from central government to deliver bus services then comes to the combined authority, and we use that budget, bus service improvement funds, etc., in order to enhance infrastructure around bus services. Or sometimes we may decide, if an operator wants to hand back a route, to then subsidise that route, if you like, because of the societal value of that route. You know, so for example, recently we made decisions to on the 33 and the 31 buses that connects the towns of Ramsey and March with Peterborough. While the provider handed back those contracts, we would subsidise those contracts in order to ensure that that service continues because of all the added value that gives.
Yeah.
Now, what will happen under franchising is that the responsibility for the routes then becomes the sole responsibility of the combined authority, and we would design the service within an agreed budget, and we'd allow obviously people to bid to provide those services. We determine the fares, the routes, etc., etc. That decision was made by the previous mayor.
Yes.
It's a considerable change. Required, forgive me, I wouldn't know full details, but it required a public consultation, and that meant that people would have, there was all sorts of legal methods for that, and I think the whole process took 18 months. Now, if I've got that slightly wrong, forgive me, but it was a considerable process that took a period of time. To unpick that decision, in principle, to go ahead with franchising and the budget that was therefore being allocated would require me to go back to consultation with another form of model. That is a decision that I have decided not to do, or not proposed to my board, for a number of reasons. I don't think I'll get it through my board, nor is it something I wish to do. I think the principle of franchising has been accepted, and that I've appointed Leon Daniels, as I said earlier, to review what a franchising model might look like.
So there would be an overall plan for routes within the area of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough.
Yes.
So under the present arrangement, as I understand what you've said, operators would apply to run certain routes. The authority may then seek to subsidise other routes, so there would still be presumably an overall plan or an overall intention of what's wanted in terms of public transport.
Yes, so there's an overall transport plan. That's the LTCP.
Yes.
That's there, but as it stands, the routes are the routes, and they're the routes that so either the routes are determined by the operators who want to run a profitable route, or the routes we would design a route, if you like, okay, and then allow people to bid for it, okay, because we will then be offering an element of public subsidy. And then there are all sorts of rules one must go through in order to ensure that public money is spent well in terms of government procurement.
And given that there's involvement under the present arrangement, from what you've said, in terms of what routes are run because of the subsidised element, do you anticipate significant change in coverage of routes as a result of franchising?
Well, that's going to be determined by determined by recommendations from the independent review. I think that's the first thing to say. But look, I think a general principle is that you want to ensure that routes are where you are going to offer an element of public subsidy. There'll be routes which link, say, major towns or settlements with villages or larger towns for the purposes of employment, access to shops and leisure and public services. But I think those routes will be determined by the independent recommendations that come out of the independent review.
Okay. Okay, thank you for that. A couple of questions about current transport plans and policies.
Of course.
You refer to the local transport and connectivity plan in paragraph 3 of your statement. You refer to it be that's the current plan formally adopted by your predecessor.
Sure.
Is there any proposal to review that plan?
Well, there's no active proposal. I've not proposed it to my board, but it's definitely my intention to revise that plan, because there are several things, as I gave in my evidence earlier, several things within it which I disagree with, such as road closures.
Yes.
It also includes a reference to the congestion charge, which was...
You mentioned that as well. It's a relatively recent plan, isn't it?
It was adopted in 2023.
Yes.
But there are references to things which I think are no longer relevant, like the congestion charge.
Yeah.
I would like to see removed.
But at the moment, no plan for review.
Well, we are going to review it, we are going to change it, but I've not put that forward to my board yet because there are other priorities.
So no decision at the moment to review?
Well, I can tell you here, there's no official decision been made by my board to review, but I am going to review it. At the moment, the focus is on the Greater Cambridge Transport Strategy.
Yes, which was going to be my next question was going to be about that, where your focus is. You say we'll set out the long-term plan for Greater Cambridge. Who will be producing that document?
The Combined Authority.
And can you tell the inquiry where things are up to at the present time?
Sure. So a statement of intent was, I think, approved by the board at our last board meeting, I think, which was last Wednesday. I went through the Transport Committee and then to the board. So that's been agreed, and the timetable is envisioned that will be finished by December 2026.
That's when the strategy will be complete. Apart from the statement of intent that you wish to proceed with it, has anything been produced at all?
Yes, there is certain, I've seen drafts, initial drafts, and we move forward, but there are several things obviously we need to do to model, which require extensive work, which model what's needed through the local plan, the emerging local plan, which obviously won't be agreed till next year either, yes. And that obviously requires close collaboration with county and city, and then we will envisage growth scenarios from the growth company, which will go beyond what is the local plan.
Has anything been published?
Not yet. It's an internal document we're working on.
Yes. So the aspiration is to go from nothing being published at all to the document being finalised within just over a year?
Yes, but there's, we've gone some way internally, but yes. There's consultation process, there's all sorts of things that we have to consider.
And consultation takes time?
It does.
Okay. On page 3 of your statement, in paragraph 8, you make a comparison there between the number of passengers that you think it's envisaged would be carried by, according to what the applicants say, and current numbers on the number 4 bus.
Yeah.
Am I right in thinking from that, what's written there, that your comparison is based solely on the existing number 4?
On the existing numbers?
Number 4.
No, in the sense that, I think we've sent in something, you talk about paragraph 8, are we? Oh,
yes.
Number 4. Yes, it is, yes, but I think we've sent in some revised figures on that.
Right, okay. Is that what was the reason for that?
Of course.
Well, perhaps I can just ask you this: is your understanding that there is the only current bus service link is the number 4?
Yes.
Just a couple of other things, Mr. Mayor. There was a short exchange earlier on this morning about the restrictive condition on the planning permission for Bourne Airfield.
Yes.
Are you familiar with the procedure for removing conditions?
I know of it. I wouldn't say that I'm a planning expert, but I know what can and can't be done.
Because I think there was a suggestion that could be dealt with. There wasn't another scheme coming forward by means
Sure.
of a discussion with the local planning authority.
Well, I mean, as I understand it, the conditions can be changed with agreement from the applicant, or the developer and the local authority. I mean, I think that's pretty normal practice.
Would you dispute if I said to you that there would be a requirement for a fresh planning application?
That is not my understanding. No. If it can be agreed between the applicant and the I think it can be done by condition. I mean, if it can't, then it may require a fresh application. But I don't, as I understand, that's not necessary. But you may tell me otherwise.
Right, I'm not going to tell you anything, but I just want to understand the basis for what you told the inquiry.
Yes, I mean, I think, as I understand it, so if something's agreed at a planning application, and then there's been a subsequent change when it comes to viability or whatever, those can be done through mechanisms that don't require a full new planning application.
Okay. As long as I understand the basis for what you said,
Yes.
that's important.
Yeah.
And finally from me, and it's in a similar type of question, the alternative that you think is available now, which you prefer, is the CPPF scheme, as I understand it from your evidence. And I think when you were referring to an alternative scheme, you also made reference to space being available because of the dual carriageway. So is it your understanding that the CPPF scheme relates to a section of highway where there is a dual carriageway?
Well, the scheme that is envisaged already is an on-road scheme for much of the way. It then obviously kind of goes off-road, but I find it convincing that it's in terms of a dual-track road that can be delivered through an on-road scheme.
Yeah, but I want to know.
Sorry, forgive me.
I want to know your understanding of the alternative, the CPPF scheme.
Okay. Well, look, I mean, I'm sure that will be explored when they come to push it forward. But that
I'm sure
is that is my understanding. I find it convincing that it can be delivered on road.
Is that because it's a dual carriageway?
I'm reluctant to say yes, because if I say yes, it's going to be perhaps pointed out to me that it's not entirely a dual carriageway, maybe a single carriageway in part. But in some of the plans that I've seen from Cambridge, past, present, future, that they seem convincing. They're convincing people. If it is dual carriageway, then obviously that's good. If it requires an element of single carriageway, I'm sure bus lanes can be constructed, and that would mean that it wouldn't be single carriageway the entire way. That is my understanding.
Thank you. I've just got a few questions as well. First thing, just in terms of just a clarification for myself, there's been a lot of talks of routes, but also mention of services.
Sure.
Is there a difference? I mean, a route, as I understand it, is the route a bus physically takes from one point to another, and the service is the number, for want of a better expression. Have I got that correct, or am I muddling things up between routes and services?
I think that sounds fair.
And so, in terms of franchising, does that sort of specify a route or a service?
Well, I mean, when you bus franchising will determine routes. Okay, it will determine cost. It will determine a number of other schemes relating to a franchising. You know, the whole of the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough area. What my board will do is make the decision to go ahead with franchising and then set a funding envelope.
So, because in the one of the documents I think you provided, let me just make sure I've got the correct one, which I think is the franchising proposal. There's a schedule in the back of there of a whole series of bus services.
Sure.
The number 4, I think, is on that list. Will franchising actually say the number 4 must follow this particular route, or does it say the number 4 must serve the following settlements and leave the actual route followed by the bus up to the operator? Just so I can understand how that actually works. I mean, how specific is the franchising?
You know, I'm not a transport expert, and so forgive me. So forgive me on that point, but I would. What franchising will do will be to determine the routes, and will determine how that network all kind of fits together with other transport initiatives. So yes, I would imagine what franchising will do is determine which routes are required.
And your understanding is by which routes the actual
where the bus goes.
You could draw it on a map to say
where
this
the
is the
bus
route.
goes. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned that you've got a Mr. Daniels doing a review for you at the moment. Can you just say a bit more about the scope of that review? Is that purely about the franchising proposal?
It is, but it's also about funding, and there's a certain it's about funding and the sort of model it will contain. So yes, there'll be a certain funding envelope we would want franchising to fit within.
And can you say what do you mean by the funding envelope?
Well, the budget that's been agreed by the board. But look, I'm not going to limit it to that. Look, I want a model which represents good value for money, which doesn't involve me having to increase council or the mayor's precept year on year. And I think the concern was that a model which was envisaged for an urban centre of Manchester of several million would not be appropriate for a rural county of 800,000 people.
Thank you. And does Mr. Daniels' brief include anything about this particular busway or any particular either existing or proposed services?
Well, I don't think we've. Forgive me, if it's in there, I don't know, but I don't think we've specified any particular routes to Mr. Daniels yet. But he will obviously have access to what routes exist right here, right now, and he'll be reviewing the system that we have right here, right now. It would not be sensible, I think, to ask him to review something that could or could not happen in the future.
And just on that, obviously, as I understand it, the scheme, if I can call it that, lists has that schedule attached to it with a whole series of services, routes. Again, I'm not quite sure whether I've got the right terminology there.
I think it's 10 an hour.
Sorry?
I think it's 10 an hour.
No, I was thinking more about the actual. Let me just get. Sorry, the document. I'll just get the reference for you. So it's the one that's titled Transport Act 2000.
Okay, so forgive me.
Cambridge and Peterborough. There's a series of annexes to that. One is the services included, and one of these is accepted services.
Okay.
I beg your pardon. Has somebody got the?
2931.1.
Thank you very much. So that's core document 2931.1, the franchising scheme. So on that, is that schedule sort of effectively fixed? Because you know, if you're going to review it, actually, would Mr. Daniels' review come up with suggestions to alter that, or is that fixed? Is that
Well, that's certainly part of his remit to suggest alternatives. But one thing I would just, this is what someone told me. If you're going to franchise a system, it probably makes sense to go from existing routes that are already there, already established, because there is a element of familiarity with those routes. You know, the public are used to using them. You know, the public are using them. They're accessing them to go to work, to access public services. So it's probably sensible to start from that basis. But that's not to say that things will not change in the future based upon local need, representation from councillors, from others.
Okay. And is it your understanding does the franchising order would you need to make would a new order need to be made for a different scheme if those annexes changed?
I'm not sure of that technical question.
Okay.
Forgive me. I'm kind of happy to provide that in writing, consulting with my transport team at the CPCA.
Okay, thank you. Just turning to your proof of evidence on page 4, and it's under section 9, and this is something I think you mentioned before, is that the combined authority would ultimately decide what services would be viable. Could you just explain for my benefit what's meant by viable? Is what's included in that scope?
Well, I mean, yes. I mean, I think what I'm suggesting is that the applicant has made an assumption of what they consider to be the preferred level of service on these busways, and that will then inform all sorts of different calculations. That involve all sorts of different calculations. What I'm saying is that when I consider franchising, that's a different thing. That's a different. I would have to consider the wider network, not just what makes sense for the busway. I have to make an assessment on what makes sense across the entire region, and whether existing routes that are in place then become financially viable should an application be made to run a service permit application be made to run a service on the busway.
So by viable, it is financial viability informed by wider issues. Is that what you've said?
That's right. I mean, there'll be criteria. I mean, there'll be other criteria attached to it, such as safety and all sorts of other things. But yes, financial viability is a key consideration.
Thank you. You also mentioned concerns over reliability and safety of the proposed technology, and you made reference, I think you used the term, it's unproven, and I think you made reference to a trial in Scotland. Can you say more about what your actual concerns over the safety of the proposed scheme are?
Well, look, I mean, again, I'm not a technical expert or guidance expert. I guess the point I'm trying to make is that any application, any service permit application would have to satisfy a pre-agreed safety criteria, which would be drawn up by those with minds far greater than mine when it comes to transport and the technical elements. I guess the only observation I'm making, and I say this as a layperson, the only observations I'm making is it being unproven, is that there was a scheme in Scotland. I think there was a sort of trial of this in Scotland, and following that they decided not to pursue the use of the technology. I think if it was proven and it was used in Scotland, I would imagine the merits of the technology would be all over the applicant's application, and it's not.
So is that the reason you've got concerns over reliability and safety of the proposed technology, because the scheme in Scotland wasn't ceased. Is that?
I mean, there's already a number of concerns about safety relating to busways, however credible or however merited they are. Okay, I'm not going to make a comment on it. All I will say is that there is an amount of public concern relating to an accident that occurred earlier this year. There were a number of times where cars have found themselves onto busways, and a court case where the county council had to pay out a substantial amount and are now remedying it with fences, etc., etc. Now, I'm not going to comment, okay, on the validity of those safety concerns. That's for other people to determine. I'm just pointing out that they're there. So that's the first thing to consider. But the second thing to consider is if we're relying on a sort of guided technology, then that raises further questions. And I would hope that whatever technology is being used to guide these buses, it's proven. And as it stands, it's not.
Sorry, could you just clarify? You said you're not commenting on the validity of safety concerns, but if I've misunderstood, I think in what you've said today, you were commenting about safety concerns.
No, because the people may have a particular concern about the safety of, I don't know, an existing busway, right? Okay, and you know there have been well documented court cases relating to that. There's been a number of accidents, cars falling into. You know, I don't want to get into that argument, okay? Because first off, that's there's already been court cases related to it, and some people safety concerns may not be valid. Others maybe. I just don't want to get into all of that. What I'm saying is that concern exists. Okay, that magic away is there, and it kind of exists. So when I consider an application against the preset criteria, I'm doing so in that atmosphere. You know, with the fact that they exist. And so what I think is absolutely crucial, and I'm sure anyone with a similar responsibility would agree to this, that when you're making a decision about safety, it's important on guidance technology, it's important that the technology is proven. And I would hope that would be the case with any application that comes forward. But as it stands, I'm not sure the technology in the application is proven.
Thank you. If I can just turn now to, again, in your proof you mentioned particularly support for light rail
Yes.
as an alternative. I think also, I don't know whether you mentioned it, but in terms of evidence that's before the inquiry, we have received something from an organisation called Cambridge Connect.
Yes.
Is that, and their evidence, I mean, I don't need to take it to you, that they've suggested a particular route that a light rail route would take. Is that the one that you are suggesting could be an alternative? Or?
No, I'm not suggesting that. I support the principle of light rail. I support and I'm very grateful to the work conducted by Cambridge Connect. They will obviously influence thinking, but you know, any sort of potential for light rail in the future needs to be an assessment. First, it needs to feature in. Needs to be considered as part of the greater Cambridge transport strategy, which we're doing at the moment. But it has to be, any light rail connection between Cambourne or Cambridge would have to be considered in light to bus services, in light of active travel, in East-West Rail, in all sorts of different considerations. So, you know, I'm not going to rigidly align myself with any proposed route put forward by Cambridge Connect, although I welcome their efforts and their support. And I support, obviously, the principle of light rail.
No, I think that's all my questions. Thank you very much,
sir.
Mr. Graham, do you wish to re-examine the matter?
I would be grateful for the opportunity to do so. I'll try to be limited in what I say and
Right.
take heed of your previous
Yes.
concerns, sir.
If you do, when you do now, please make sure that your questions are directed just to points that he was asked about
Exactly.
in cross-examination and by myself and Mr. Underwood.
Precisely.
So I appreciate Mr. Graham isn't a professional advocate, so I'm not going to jump up and down at every point, but if there's an obviously leading question, I will.
Yes, of course.
Thank you, Mr. Cameron. Mr. Mayor, you were asked about the terminology of routes and services. Were you using those two terms in effect interchangeably?
Yes.
Okay. And when you talked before about the issues that Mr. Baker raised about the busway route, is that because that he was envisaging, in your view, more than one service operating on the busway route, which in effect, in your terminology, could be multiple routes
Yes.
on the busway route?
Yes.
So that,
Sorry, forgive me, I thought I'd made that clear.
I just wanted to make sure that we were all understood what the terminology was on that. Likewise, you talked about the schedule of services that your predecessor put together. So your position on that is that you are not necessarily committed to that schedule of services, and that you would
These are, all the questions so far are completely proper, because you can't ask questions which suggest the answer, so you have to ask them in a different way. And I know it's difficult and it takes, and most of us get it wrong even if we've been doing it for years, but if you could try not to do that.
I should endeavour to follow your advice, Mr. Cameron. Are you committed to the schedule of services that your predecessor prepared?
No.
Thank you. You talked about, or you were asked about dual carriageway. Can I draw your attention to paragraph 10 of your statement of evidence, Roman numeral 3, under paragraph 10? You refer there to what Cambridge past, present and future have looked at, and you talk under that small item 3 about routes that could involve the A428 and A14. Are those routes dual carriageway?
They are.
So in terms of a route to Cambridge that would be on dual carriageway all the way to at least North Cambridge, that would be one of the routes that would be
They're fully, look, they're fully dual. And look, it's obviously for Cambridge past, present and future to present their alternative, and for them to be questioned on the validity of that alternative. This is contained within in my submission on the basis of the information that they're required. If it's accurate, which I'm assured it is, because the A14 and the A42A are in fact dual, then that's why it's been included. If there are others that are not, then that's for the Cambridge past, present and future to defend under, I'm sure, detailed scrutiny at a later date.
Yes. Likewise, I think at one moment you were asked about the Greater Cambridge Transport Strategy and the statement of intent that was passed by your board. Was that statement of intent accompanied by a board paper?
Yes.
And did that paper set out similar reasoning to the one that you gave earlier about scenarios and modelling?
Okay, well, I mean, those papers are public documents and they can be accessed. But I don't. The decision to franchise has been based on a lot of the points that I've made today, and modelling would have been included within those papers. So look, I mean, I think it would be an unwise move to unpick that arrangement.
Perhaps I can put it like this. Have you been clear in your interactions with the board and board members and officers that the Greater Cambridge Transport Strategy will involve the modelling of those?
Yes, sorry, forgive me, I don't understand the question. Yes, so that I've been clear that whatever scheme is devised through the Greater Cambridge Transport will use that modelling.
Thank you. You were asked about the need for or the potential need for the board's permission to review the local transport plan. Do you
it's
think
it's a sub strategy, so they don't necessarily. Oh, sorry, you're talking about the existing transport plan.
Yeah, so you're correct that the GCTS is a sub strategy.
It's a sub-strategy.
I was talking about the local transport plan as a whole.
Sorry,
So
okay.
it was suggested that you would need the permission of the board to review it at this stage. Do you think that will still be the case, given our previous discussion after the passage of the bill?
Well, after the passage of the bill and what's envisioned in the bill, I would not need, I wouldn't need it necessarily, no. But I think in the spirit of collaboration and working together, I would take it to my board. But on a very linear, legalistic point, I wouldn't need it, no.
Okay. And turning to the bill, because the process in Parliament by which that bill will be passed was raised by Mr. Cameron. In your experience, where the House of Lords at committee stage makes extensive amendments to what has been put forward by the Commons, if they are out of line with the intention of the government, are they generally upheld when they return to the House of Commons?
So, through the passage of legislation, there are obviously, if the House of Lords suggests things which go against the intention of the bill, then they will then go back to the House of Commons, obviously for approval, and they can be sent back. And it's a process called ping-ponging, where legislation can be sent back. What the House of Lords can't do, the House of Lords can make minor changes to legislation to make it better. Okay, what it can't do is, and when the House of Commons asserts its authority, if it goes against the general principle of the bill as agreed at second reading.
Thank you. It was suggested that if the bill passes in its current form, the 2017 order would need to be changed. Now, you said that you weren't certain and that you'd leave that to others to determine. That's fine. I just wanted to ask, again, in your experience as a Member of Parliament, if a change to legislation is made on the face of an act, in other words, primary legislation that says that something is the case, does that overrule any secondary legislation?
Yes.
To the contrary?
Yes.
Right.
Draw attention to the clause which says it's subject to any enactment.
Well, that is with respect to, I think, a different point to the one that was being made, and subject to any enactment is the grandfathering issue, which was raised in the initial evidence. But doesn't require an USI. So I think that on that you might be mistaken, because the grandfathering provision doesn't require an USI.
It's not a question of whether or not Mr. Cameron's mistaken. It's a question of what the scope of the cross-examination was, Mr. Graham.
Fair enough. I just didn't understand.
So just to come back, so what I said to Mr. Cameron when he asked me that question was, if you say so. But if there's some sort of doubt as to whether a fresh SI is required, I'm very happy to go to my legal officers at the Combined Authority and make that clear in writing.
Thank you. Mr. Cameron also drew your attention to a 2018 document and a key recommendation 7, which is the Independent Economic Review. On the same page that it's talking about that recommendation, it also talked about the busway in relation to the CAM. Are you aware of the CAM, and what relation, if any, do you think that has to current transport?
Well, the CAM Metro was
sorry, what's a CAM?
So I'll explain if you don't mind. So the CAM Metro was a scheme envisaged by for mass rapid transport, envisaged by the previous mayor but one. So that was the person who was mayor prior to 2021. And that scheme envisaged tunnelling going under Cambridge and connecting Cambridge and, well, like mass rapid transport. What the scheme does, and the CTC busway obviously envisaged all the way back in 2014 had to take account of that. And what that envisaged it would come to a point around Grange Road, I believe, where it would go into a tunnel and linking with the CAM, and it would go tunnelling under Cambridge. That's not changed in the sense that it's going exactly where it was, but now there's no tunnel. So then buses would then have to go into the regular Cambridge network, and there are obviously huge amounts of consequences for franchising as a result of that.
So it's not for me to give evidence, but there is evidence on all these matters which is not consistent with what Mr. Bristow has just said.
Well, I'd be okay. All right. So I think it's.
Mr. Mayor, you've said what you've said.
Yes.
And I've
I
heard the
understand
intervention. Mr Graham, can we move on, please?
Yes, just to be clear, you don't intend to build the
No.
CAM metro
No.
tunnels as part of your
No.
Greater Cambridge Transport
No.
Strategy? Thank you. It was also suggested that you hadn't put forward any alternative to C2C busway. Does that fit with your understanding of what the Greater Cambridge Transport Strategy will be doing? Or is that...
Well, the Greater Cambridge Transport Strategy would inform any mass rapid transport or transit measures that may be necessary, alluding to growth scenarios in the future. They will obviously come up with alternatives as part of that process.
Will the scenarios for buses and other things go beyond the interventions proposed, for example, by CPPF?
Yes.
Thank you. And in terms of the modelling, what is your understanding of the basis of that modelling and how soon you will be able to see not just what the impact on current data of the busway might be, but its interactions with a network and with demand across Cambridge?
Well, look, that work is ongoing now, and that modelling work is happening right now, and we will see what happens when the strategy is published for draft, and then goes through consultation, and then finally agreed in December 2026.
Thank you.
Is that it, Mr Graham? That's it. Thank you. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
As it's close to 1 o'clock, I'm going to suggest that the inquiry is adjourned now for lunch, and when we resume it will be evidence from Friends of the Camp. I think we'll resume at 10 to 2, so the inquiry is adjourned now. Thank you.